2 weeks ago today, Charlie Kirk was assassinated in front of the entire world. We all saw every single very gruesome angle. Charlie Kirk being assassinated. Jimmy Kimmel goes on his show, takes shots at MAGA, takes shots at Trump, said that Trump viewed Charlie Kirk as nothing more than a pet goldfish, and said, oh, you know, the shooter was MAGA, he was MAGA. Like, just complete fucking lies that he tried to then say, oh, these are just jokes, guys. These are just jokes. After a man was assassinated in front of the entire world. Anyways, the left has everybody somehow had the ability to spin this whole Charlie Kirk situation and are pretending as if Jimmy Kimmel were the one that got assassinated. It's fucking unreal, the nerve that these people have to spin this whole narrative in their favor for Jimmy Kimmel acting as if he was the one that died.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yep. The professional victims will be professional victims. As soon as anything happened to anybody on their side that had any level of like influence, because they know what that looks like, they realize that they're completely vulnerable when that happens. They immediately ran screaming and crying, saying we're being attacked, authoritarianism, fascism, guys, look at that, our freedoms are under attack, look at this, we care so much about free speech, and then tried to say, oh, these people that care so much about free speech don't care about Jimmy being fired. And we're like, he can say whatever he wants, but we're not his employers. Like, you want to run your mouth in front of your employer and act a fool? You know, this isn't Jimmy Kimmel saying something in private that somebody videotaped. This isn't Jimmy Kimmel, you know, private text messages with his friends that they're putting out there to the world. This is Jimmy Kimmel on a public platform in front of thousands of people that were watching, because there wasn't more than that watching his show, saying horrendous things about somebody who had just lost their life. And then he's going to be surprised when people get upset about it, when people call him to the station and say, yo, we don't want to watch this guy on our televisions, we're kind of pissed about this kind of stuff, and that people get professionally offended by that kind of stuff. This is not this is a very, I would say, unique situation. This is a very specific situation where somebody got consequences because of their job, because of the position that they hold when it comes to influence, and got held accountable for that influence, and then got upset about it, try to act like they were being victimized for it.
Yeah, I said it on Saturday. Everybody has the freedom of speech, but when it comes to your workplace or your employer, like, you have freedom of speech to say some wacky, gnarly shit if you want to, but you do not have the freedom of no consequence when those things are said. You think you're just going to, like, disrespect your employer and, like, you know, say you're going to go up to your boss and say, hey, your wife's a whore and I banged her, and you're not going to get fired? No. Are you fucking kidding me? You have the right to say some crazy shit. You don't have the right. You don't have the freedom of no consequence of what you say. And that's what happened to Jimmy Kimmel. But oh my gosh, Mark Ruffalo and Ben Stiller and all these fucking weirdos are saying our freedom of speech is being attacked. Oh my God, from Donald Trump. When ironically, yesterday we find out about YouTube that our freedom of speech was being attacked in 2020. Huh.
The Democratic
Funny how
Party
that works.
Yeah, the Democratic Party was looking really bad. Media tried to spin the assassination of Charlie Kirk as something completely different, with some people even calling it like, oh, it's just like romantic. Oh, that he did this for his trans boyfriend. It almost reads as romantic, saying that the text message between the shooter and his boyfriend seemed a little bit romantic and touching. The Democratic Party was looking really, really bad, considering years and years and years of them calling the Republican Party, the Republican side, fascists and Nazis, and a threat to democracy, a threat to society. And then you have this assassination happening, and they're scrambling to try and change the narrative because it makes their party look terrible, because for years and years and years, they've just been spewing hate about the Republican Party and MAGA Republicans being a threat to democracy, and Donald Trump is literally Hitler. So now you had Jimmy Kimmel go on his show and say that Donald Trump was trying to use the murder of Charlie Kirk for political points, when that's exactly what the Democratic Party did with Jimmy Kimmel. They were like, oh my goodness, finally something happens that we can do to try and, change the narrative and flip the script and say that Jimmy Kimmel is actually the victim in all of this, which is wild. They're using Jimmy Kimmel to make themselves look better, saying that, oh, actually, look, it's Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the one who is silencing free speech. and Jimmy Kimmel, let's put him on a pedestal and use him for political points. It's freaking hilarious to me. And the sad thing is that they completely lost the plot. A man was murdered, was assassinated for his beliefs, which were based in gospel. And you want to try and say that Jimmy Kimmel's show being taken off the air is one of the worst things to happen to free speech in our country? Give me a break.
Yeah.
I have the clip. So this is the one where he tears up and cries. Jimmy Kimmel is a horrible actor. When I was watching this, I was like, man, he's really bad at acting and fake crying.
Yep.
I don't think what I have to say is going to make much of a difference. If you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't. I have no illusions about changing anyone's mind. But I do want to make something clear because it's important to me as a human. And that is, you understand that it was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man. I don't think there's anything funny about it. I posted a message on Instagram on the day he was killed, sending love to his family and asking for compassion, and I meant it, and I still do. Nor was it my intention to blame any specific group for the actions of what it was obviously a deeply disturbed individual. That was really the opposite of the point I was trying to make, but I understand that to some that felt either ill-timed or unclear, or maybe both. And for those who think I did point a finger, I get why you're upset. If the situation was reversed, there's a good chance I'd have felt the same way. I have many friends and family members on the other side who I love and remain close to, even though we don't agree on politics at all. I don't think the murderer who shot Charlie Kirk represents anyone. This was a sick person who believed violence was a solution, and it isn't. Ever.
No apology. No apology. He just said, for the people who misunderstood me, well, sorry that you misunderstood me, pretty much.
Yep. Yep. I never intended to say this or mean this, and if you didn't understand that, then that's sorry that you didn't get it. But yeah. Yep.
He said that it wasn't my intention to make light of Charlie Kirk's death. That was the opposite of what I was trying to do with his monologue. Okay, so the opposite. MAGA Republicans are trying to pretend that the killer wasn't one of their own and try to use the death of Charlie Kirk for political points.
Yeah.
I don't understand how that's the opposite of the point he was trying to get across.
Yeah.
He just had to say whatever he had to say so that he didn't have to apologize. He already made that clear. We knew that before the show was even going to air, that he told Disney and what's the other streaming, Sinclair. He already told them that he wasn't going to apologize.
Yep.
So, absolutely. I think that if Jimmy Kimmel, cried less on his show, we've seen him cry a lot on his show to the point where it's almost memeable because he cries so much about whatever the current issue is. And he instead he chose to not weep for Charlie Kirk, not talk about, how terrible a man being assassinated on American soil, expressing his beliefs was terrible. He chose not to weep for Charlie Kirk, instead to make light of the situation, which he absolutely did. Him saying that he didn't intend to make light of it. He goes to the writer's room. People make this monologue for him. He reads it, goes through all of these checks, and he decides to say these things. So absolutely, it was a decision made to make light of the situation or to turn the death of Charlie Kirk onto the problem of MAGA Republicans being the problem in our country. That was his absolute motive for that monologue that day. So for him being like, it wasn't my intention to make, yes, it was, because this went through multiple channels. It had to be approved. People wrote this. So yeah, it absolutely was. And for him to say, oh, it wasn't my intention. By the way, guys, I have Republican friends and family that I don't agree with. Oh, and by the way, I also get threats. But you know what? I know that's not.
I'm not racist. I have black friends.
Yeah. By the way, I also get threats. I get threats. My family, my kids get threats. People I know, we all get threats. But we know it's not like the bad, the most people. It's just the worst people.
Yeah.
Well, the worst of the worst of the worst shot and killed Charlie Kirk, and you weren't able to show some grace on your show that night to him and his family.
100%. And the other part of it is like I watched the entire monologue, this is in the middle of his monologue. This isn't at the very beginning. This isn't what he led with. He literally leads with complaining about authoritarianism and how, you know, the government tried to take his job away and how free speech is under attack.
I think that's what this is right here.
Yeah, he makes a ton of jokes. Yeah, well, let's go ahead and play it because, dude, this, once again, like I said, this is before. That was in the middle of his speech that he gave that little section here. So,
President
go
of
ahead.
the United States made it very clear he wants to see me and the hundreds of people who work here fired from our jobs. Our leader celebrates Americans losing their livelihoods because he can't take a joke.
It wasn't a joke.
It wasn't a joke.
It wasn't a joke.
You know,
why don't you tell that to Kevin Hart when they fired him from the Oscars for a joke he made and apologized for multiple times, and then said, I'm not going to keep apologizing for this joke that I made 10, 15 years ago. And then they said, well, cool, then you're fired and we're not going to give you this job. Like, come on, people. Like,
you know how I look at his joke? I look at his joke as like the Weekend Update from Saturday Night Live, how they give you the information and then they make a joke about it afterwards. Right. So like the first part of it is information on what's happening. And then the next part is the joke, the zinger at the end, which is what, you know, his video on Donald Trump was supposed to be after he gave you the information at the beginning.
Yep.
So that information at the beginning was misinformation. It was wrong information. And at that time, a lot of stuff that came out about Charlie Kirk's killer was already there.
Yeah,
it was already out there. They already knew about it. So that information that he gave you at the beginning, the setup, which was supposed to be the correct information before the joke, was wrong. And that's what got people upset. It wasn't the joke at the end. It was the setup.
Yeah. And I've said this many times before. The risk that you run as a comedian when making jokes, edgy jokes, controversial jokes, is not being funny. And when you're not funny, that's what upsets people, and there's going to be a consequence for that. That is the risk you run. Yes, it is important to give people the freedom of speech and give comedians and performers the freedom of speech to be able to say things and risk saying things and speaking to power and making jokes about people in power and government. All of that stuff is fine. But if you're not funny and people don't want to hear what you have to say, that is a risk you run, because then there's backlash for that. And Kimmel wasn't funny, made light of something that, and then like Steph said a bunch of things that weren't true, that we knew were verifiably not true. And if you didn't have confirmation that it was or wasn't true, you shouldn't have said it. And then to turn around and try to blame Donald Trump, a man who was deplatformed for misinformation, Donald Trump, a man who his supporters and people that supported him were actively, actively shut down on multiple social media platforms that were that were actively worked against on social media, like we're now discovering on YouTube and all of these other platforms, that, you know, the election and election information and all of this stuff, all working against one side, to turn around and then say that he's the problem and he's the one that's trying to attack people. Dude, come on, people. It's wild listening to these people say this wild stuff and actually believe it.
Somehow able to squeeze Colbert out of CBS. Then he turned his sights on me, and now he's openly rooting for NBC to fire Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers and the hundreds of Americans who work for their shows who don't make millions of dollars. And I hope that if that happens, or if there's even any hint of that happening, you will be 10 times as loud as you were this week. We have to speak out.
Can you pause it real quick?
Against this.
It's so funny that he once again then lumps in Colbert. Colbert got fired because his ratings suck.
Yeah.
It's because his show isn't making any money. It's costing the studios money. It wasn't, because once again, if that was the case, then where was all these actors and people fighting, oh, Colbert's being canceled because of Trump? Bro, this isn't about Trump. It's about the bottom line. Nobody wants to listen to your trash anymore. You've lied to the American people. You've discredited yourself. You discredited the people that came before you that hosted the Tonight Show. Also, you're the one who refuses to change and change with the times. You're putting the people that work with you out of jobs. We've seen so many times people get laid off, people get fired from their jobs in the entertainment sector because of how much money they're not making. And for him to sit there and turn around and be like, oh, people that aren't making millions of dollars are getting fired. Yeah, part of the reason they're going to lose their job is because of you, because you have millions of dollars and you don't care what happens to the people around you. Don't pretend you care about your crew now after the fact, and when you're like, oh shoot, now I'm being held accountable for what I said. It's wild, man.
It is about the bottom line and about companies realizing that late night talk shows are pretty much a thing of the past. Nobody's watching them anymore, and that is that is true by looking at the ratings. Nobody is watching these talk shows anymore, and the talk show hosts Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, they refuse to believe that they are now irrelevant. Like their show is a thing of the past. Nobody watches them anymore. Nobody finds them funny, especially from 2020 on. And when you realize that they were nothing but a bunch of bought and paid for propagandists. But they are a thing of the past. And if anything, COVID sort of gave rise to alternative media, alternative voices, people that you can listen to. Podcasts, yes, it's a thing of the past. Nobody is tuning in to watch these shows, and they don't want to believe it. They want to believe that they are still relevant, that they are a voice of a fringe minority of people, and they don't want to be silenced. Yet the majority of the American people and people all over the world are going to alternative media. They're going to listening to podcasts. They're going and watching YouTube and independent creators and independent voices, because these types of voices, I mean, they there's no agenda behind there. They're just speaking their mind. They're regular American citizens speaking their mind. And that's what people are watching. That's what they tune into, is the authenticity of that person. And when these people, these bought and paid for propagandists, aren't authentic anymore, you can sense that the American people want authenticity, and that's not what these are. That's not what these talk show hosts are all about. They're there to push a political agenda. They're bought and paid for propagandists. I mean, and it was completely apparent during COVID. When you saw, who was that one that was dancing with the jab people behind him?
That was Colbert.
That was Colbert.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it was complete. It's complete propaganda, and even celebrities know this. Celebrities understand this because they'll go on these talk shows to push their movies, their current movies or whatever. But they're more excited to go on independent YouTube channels.
Bingo. Yep.
To promote their movies, because they know that there's going to be more eyes on those channels. They know that they can be themselves on those channels. They really don't care about the late night talk shows.
Yep. And the best thing that comedians, like stand-up comics, have done is start their own podcasts, like Theo Vaughn, Shane Gillis, Andrew Santino, and Bobby Lee, and even Joe Rogan, of course, is the big one. Like, they're actually funny. They're actually true comedians. And Steph's right. I mean, we said this last week, me, Mike, and Jay, like, actors used to go on these late night shows because it was a necessity for them to push the next TV show or movie that they were promoting. Now they don't need that because they have their own Instagrams, they have their own Twitters, or they're going on podcasts or YouTube shows with true comedians to push their new movie out there. But also, it's a more raw, genuine experience when they're not following a script like on these late night shows. They can actually sit down and have a conversation. You get to learn more about some of the interesting, I know they're few and far between, but interesting actors out there, like a Chris Pratt or a Mel Gibson or a Charlie Sheen, stuff like that. Like that's fun to watch them in a raw experience on a podcast like that. And then afterwards, they'll plug their book or they'll plug their TV show or something like that. But late night shows, they're obsolete, man. They're a thing of the past.
Well, and the thing is, like, they used to be, at one point they were like, cool, let's find like funny things to do or things to kind of put celebrities in interesting, situations. But part of the reason that these shows don't work like they do either is because the celebrities that were on these shows, because they have their own social media, also were so driven by political ideology that they couldn't keep their mouth shut for 5 seconds. The point of these shows was supposed to be, that's where we get the access to these people, these celebrities, in a fun, controlled environment. But most of these guys cannot stop crashing out about politics on all of their social media. So they've completely destroyed their own star power. They've completely destroyed the haze of Hollywood that used to be around them. And
Right.
so that's partially why that's affected the shows that they're on as well. And you know, they used to give opportunity for people to be like musicians and you know, comedians and different acts and things like that. Now it's just become, I'm going to stand here and give a monologue about politics the whole time. And that's what we're going to clip out, and that's what we're going to push everywhere. It's wild, man.